As you've heard, my name is Stella, Mystica, Sabiiti from Uganda, but many years during my adult life I've lived in exile as a result of the violence in my country. But now I'm happy to say that I'm back in my country, although I'm not living and working in my country. It's very complicated. So like one of the students here said, he's a citizen of the world. I feel the same, and I think most of us are citizens of the world. My topic tonight is talking about the African traditional mechanisms of dealing with conflict. I'm sure there is a better way of putting it, but this was my choice. Dietrich asked me what would I like to talk about, and I said the challenge of using traditional African mechanisms of dealing with conflict today, in today's conflict. Which means, I'm assuming, or my statement means that before today's conflicts, there was African traditional mechanisms of dealing with conflicts, which also means there were conflicts before the conflicts of today. But then what has changed? Why am I saying there is a challenge? What I have done, what I'm going to share with you this evening is work done by others, but also work done by myself. I'm very much interested in the African tradition of doing everything from conversations, because we really talk. We are a community that talks. We can't do without talking. We can't do without rubbing. You know, we like to touch. We like to feel. This hair of mine was braided by 2 women. It took them like 4 hours. And when you're doing all that, you're talking, you're laughing, you're doing that. We like to do that, and conversations happen, and you build relationships. So what I did, I looked at all this work that others have done and what I have observed myself, and structured it following the conflict curve or the conflict cycle. We've been talking about it, there's some more things to add to that. But to look at how African traditional mechanisms were used traditionally to prevent conflict, and then if they didn't manage to prevent, how did they manage to sort of manage the conflict so that it doesn't get out of hand? But if that failed, how do they deal with crisis? And after that, how do they deal with resolving it and then stabilizing it? These are common words I use whether I'm talking about African traditional mechanisms or not. So how did they do this? Many times we take Africa as one country. Even us ourselves, we forget, we think Africa is one country. It isn't. So it's a huge continent. That map is not drawn to scale, in case you didn't know. Africa is a lot bigger than that. And those other countries up there, that continent is much smaller than what it is right now. And always people ask, how come River Nile is climbing up? How can a river climb up? Why isn't it flowing down? So you can turn the map of the world map upside down so that the River Nile can come down. Can go down. Okay, so we have so many different countries on the continent, but there's certain threads that you can draw from tribe to tribe, clan to clan, from one part of the continent, and so on and so forth. In prevention, building relationships in the African culture is very important. Relationship building. And we have so many different mechanisms. I haven't had a chance to check with my brothers and sisters in my class from Africa, but I'm sure they will agree with me. Building relationships is very important. How do we do that? It's a foundation for building good, strong relationships so that if something goes wrong, if there is a conflict, because whether you like it or not, a conflict will happen sooner or later. If the foundation of that friendship, of that relationship is not strong, you will be shaken and then you will be destroyed. So that's why we cement, we have to have those friendships and so on. We use totems, we have proverbs, we have all sorts of mechanisms. For instance, in my own tribe, if a stranger came, if someone who didn't belong, someone I'd never seen, came through our village in the evening and was too scared to travel in the dark, of course, because he or she couldn't see the path, and comes, you just go to any house and you say, could you put me up? And the people in that house will put you up, give you food, give you a place to sleep, really entertain you, and it is forbidden, even if that person does something wrong in the family, it's forbidden for you to raise a conflict with that person. Because, this is the reason, because in the morning, very early, at cock crow, when the cock crows in the morning, this stranger will get up and go and continue on his or her journey. So if you've quarreled in the night, you don't have an opportunity to resolve that conflict or that quarrel. So it's just taboo in my tribe. You never fight with someone whom you will never meet again. You have to, if you have to have a quarrel with someone whom you live with, because already you have that foundation and you have the opportunity to deal with the conflict. Another way of preventing conflict, I can't talk without giving stories. My mother belongs to one clan, and then her mother-in-law, who was the mother of my father, she lived with us because ours is a patrilineal society. So it just happened, it was a coincidence that my mother's clan and her mother-in-law's clan were opposite enemy clans. And they are not enemies in reality, but in each tribe where you have different clans, clans are little partitions within a tribe, each clan has to have an opposite enemy clan. You have to, it's there, it's already written in our old books. We didn't have books, but you know what I mean. So that means that the people who belong to that opposite enemy clan have every right in the world to say all the nasty things to you. And you have all the right in the world to say all the nasty things to you. So when I was growing up, I always watched my mom and her mother-in-law quarreling and saying bad things to each other, and it would come from nowhere. But that was a way of letting off steam. If you have quarreled with someone else, you don't bottle it up, you've got that person to go and that person also does back. In Zimbabwe, they have the same. We have a brother, he's away today. In Zimbabwe, that opposite clan, if someone dies from one clan and is being buried, of course, all the speeches are, oh, that person was the greatest, he or she did that and that for the community, and but there is a member of the opposite clan. That member will stand up and say, what rubbish! No. That was the worst man on the hill. That was the worst woman. He was a thief. She was a da-da-da-da-da. And they would, everybody would let, and then others will, but they will not be allowed to say anything bad. What is that doing? It's just helping any of the people who ever had a fight or a disagreement with the person who has died to let off that anger. And they are being given permission by the person who is appointed from the opposite clan. That's really a wonderful thing. So some of these things have been happening in the past, but we've also brought them over to today's world. Because my mom is still alive, although my grandmother is not, but I know that it still happens in the villages. Then we have the use of nature, the ecology, the ecosystem. Every tribe has a totem. Mine, for instance, would have a monkey, so would be called the monkey family. That means that everybody who belongs to my tribe cannot kill a monkey. Your job is to protect monkeys everywhere you come across them. It's your job. Others, it's a tree. Others, it's stones. It could be anything, and you're called after that. Could be lizards, could be snakes. It's almost everything that is most likely going to be endangered because of what they do. So if it's a snake, you know, whoever comes across a snake, they want to kill it. But your job is to protect a snake. We have proverbs, as I have said also, and as you're growing up, the culture makes sure that every child gets to know, to hear of these proverbs and also stories. Unfortunately, and this is one of the challenges I'm saying, what happens? I mean, my children were born and brought up abroad. They're just now beginning to struggle learning the language, the local language. By the time we came back to Uganda, my grandparents were dead. My mom doesn't live with them. My dad is gone. Who is going to give them this information and this knowledge? I don't have the time. I'm not even living with my family. So that is a threat. That is a threat. Traditionally, I remember Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, came to Uganda and she gave a speech and she quoted something from Africa. And she said, the whole village, a child is raised by a whole village. Yeah, but that is what we do. That's what we do. It's not just your parents who say, no, don't do that, do it this way, do that. It's everybody. Everyone who comes across you and finds you doing wrong things, they will do that. So it's the whole community that takes care of a child. So that is socialization and indoctrinating you to behave in a certain way that is acceptable. And it is all so that you prevent conflict. Because for us, in Africa, I think I can speak for the other countries as well, when one person commits a crime, it's not just that person who has done wrong. It's the family first and foremost, then the clan, in the cultures where you have clans, and then the tribe, or it could be that village. So when one person commits a crime, the whole group, so many people are shamed, and it is in their interest to make sure that that doesn't happen. I will give an example of an Acholi tribe. It's from Uganda, northern Uganda. For those of you who have heard of the Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA, COIN, you can Google, because it's happening right now. He's a rebel leader. So many atrocities have been committed by him and his group. He kidnaps children and he forces them to do those bad things. Yeah. So in that tribe, they have very nice traditions. One is called Matoput. So now I'm going to talk about prevent conflict which has happened, but which might get even worse. So I'm talking about managing a conflict. I've now left preventing a conflict. So managing a conflict, if you will forgive me, I'm going to say a young man. If a young man happens to kill a man or a person from another tribe, another village, another clan, the very first thing that happens is that the relatives of this young man have to get hold of him and help him escape. Now you're all going to say, huh? But isn't that wrong? Guess what they're doing with him? They're taking him across over so many hills and valleys and so on and villages, taking him to his mother's village. Because it is also a patrilineal society, that means it's the man who is the head of the family. So if the sons want to get married, they get girls from wherever and the girls come. It's the women who come to the family and they belong to this family. Which means that the family of the young wife or the wives is always far away. So again, building that relationship in that tribe, every young man is allowed, every young person is allowed to go and visit the uncle, so the brothers of the mother, who are automatically, of course, far away. And there they can take any chickens they want, they can chase any goat they want, and they take, and no one will say anything to them. It's built within the culture, it's there and it has a name. Now, once this person has killed, this young man has killed a person, and the relatives quickly take him and take him far away to his mother's home, where there is the uncles and the aunties and so on. And why have they done that? To tell him, no, let's hide you so that you're not caught? No. They're trying to create a good, safe environment surrounded by loved people who love him. Remember, he can take any chicken he wants anytime. He's very free when he goes there. So it's a very nice, safe atmosphere for him. And now they start working on him. They start asking him what exactly happened. Did he indeed kill a person? Why did he kill the person? And so on. They're asking in a nice, nice way. It's very strange. Africans have a way of talking which is maybe like everybody else, but when it comes to marriage, burials, weddings, and dealing with conflict, they assume a different kind of language. The words they choose are different, although it's the same language. It's really very beautiful to witness. So they work on this young person until this person starts admitting, yes, I did this because of that and that, and da-da-da-da-da-da. At the same time, the family of which has lost a person, where the person has been killed, the family now, this is the aunties, the sisters of the father, or the female cousins of the father of the person who has died, have to mobilize all their young people, young men, and bring them together, and also go through some ritualistic rituals to help them realize that they shouldn't go to revenge because they would want to go quickly to the other family to revenge. Isn't that a wonderful system? Meanwhile, they appoint emissaries. Each family or each group appoints emissaries who keep going across to the other family to check the family which has lost a person. And the family which has lost a person also sends some people to come to this family whose son has killed their person, also to keep checking. They're like thermometers. They're checking the temperature. Are they still angry? Are they still hurt? Do they still want revenge? They bring messages. They bring things. Eventually, no one wants to do any revenge. At the same time, the young man who has committed the crime is ready now to face the other family. So when the time is right, then they come together. I know I'm in Switzerland, and they say in Switzerland, okay, you have watches and clocks. In Africa, we have the time. We may not have the clocks and watches, but we have the time. Oh, we own the time. So because of our rituals and systems and things take so much time. If someone invites you to come and eat, you don't, thank you for the invitation, oh, I'm coming. You first pretend you didn't hear. And then they will say, there is food, what did you say? It will be about maybe the fourth time that, okay, I'll come. So it's like that. We have the time. And maybe that's why we run in problems sometimes. Okay, so then they go through that. Now I'm going to talk, I just give one example of that. And in fact, when the Lord's Resistance Army youth, they manage to escape from the LRA and they come back, they also have to go through rituals. One of which is, before they enter a house, the home, eggs are put in the entrance and they have to break the eggs. And you wonder, what exactly does that do? Yeah, we break eggs every time. But the atmosphere is done, you're prepared before that. I think even maybe the previous night you don't sleep very well, there's all sorts of things going on and all that. By the time you do something without eggs, it's like the most important thing you've ever done. So I think they are working on your psychology. And I'm really not ashamed to say that when my dad died a few years ago, my parents were very strict Catholics. I'd never seen them do anything traditional or anything. But when my dad died, and I went for burial, because I'm the eldest child and a daughter, I had to go through certain rituals. And I was looking at my mother like, Mom, they're making me... And she was like, I'm not here. Because she too had to go through some certain rituals. I went through this the whole night and in the morning, and just all of us, none of us cried bad tears for my father. We were all celebrating my dad. I tell you, even up to now, when I dream about him, he's saying nice things to me and all that. So I think it's mainly psychological. I don't know what it is, but I can assure you that our ancestors knew exactly what they were doing. Now I'll go to another tribe, Turkana. Actually, this one is preventive. Now, this is a pastoral community, as Dietrich was saying. I work with pastoral groups as well. And most of these, if you've heard what's going on in Mali, it's also to do with that. The tribes that wander for miles and miles with their camels, horses, donkeys, but mainly cows and sheep and so on and so forth. They tend to cross other people's territory. So the Turkana in northwestern Kenya, that's bordering eastern Uganda, and there's also similar tribes there and similar tribes in South Sudan and also in Nyangatom and so, and then others in south in Ethiopia. It's called the Karamoja cluster. So the Turkana, when they know that the dry season is coming, the drought is coming. There's no rain for months and months. They've got to go and look for grass and water for their cows. They send emissaries also. They send ambassadors, so to speak, to the next tribes and the other tribes beyond and the other tribes beyond, to say that from our experts, traditional experts, the rain won't be coming for the next da-da-da-da-da-da, so we need to look for grass and water for our cows. Will you allow us passage through? And so then those tribes which are neighboring, which are usually agriculturalists, that's where the problem comes in. Because the animals trample over their crops and they cause so much harm to the food, and then there is famine and so on. So then the tribe is given enough time and warning, it will clear and prepare the place or the space which these tribes come to pass through with their animals. Now, one of the threats we have now is if you have boundaries, you have Kenya, it's got very clear borders. You have Tanzania, very clear borders. We have very clear borders. How will they manage to do that, to follow? Because as far as our pastoralists in East Africa are concerned, they were put on this earth to take care of the cow. They weren't made to live. No, it's because of the cow. So they have to do everything possible to make the cow happy. So if they cannot cross international borders, which before did not exist, they were free to do that and send their ambassadors beforehand and all that, how will they do that? We have that problem. If you've ever gone to Tanzania and Kenya and Tanzania, in that order, traveling from Nairobi to Arusha, please check them on the map. It's your assignment for all of you. You will notice that the Maasai tribe refused to say whether they're Kenyans or Tanzanians. They said, but this is our land. So they just crossed the border anyhow. You just see them going, and they're very happy to do it. And they're looking the other way. You know, there is the customs officials and the immigration officers. They don't care. In their red, nice prints. What other example can I share with you? There is, you know, the Kalahari, down south there near Botswana. Okay, down south there in Africa. There's another desert apart from the Sahara Desert. These are the tribes which people call Bushmen, but it's not a good name, so please don't call them Bushmen. They call themselves another name. What they do, they fight with bows and arrows. And one little scratch with one arrow, you're dead in a few seconds. Very deadly. So, and yet every man who is adult enough, I don't know what that is. That means we shouldn't be working. Thank you. It's gone. Every man carries, is it a quiver? The thing where you have all the arrows like Robin Hood and so on. So they have so many arrows, and it's very easy to kill, you know, like, it's like weapons of mass destruction, if you can say, because it can kill, one arrow could kill so many people. They are strictly forbidden to pull out that arrow and point it at anyone unless they mean to kill that person. And that is, they don't kill, they have strict orders. You don't just kill anyone just because you have disagreed or he or she has done something bad to you. It's going to be like war. That's when they are allowed to use those things. Very strict, and they all adhere to that because, again, they have all those beliefs in mythology and so on. In Africa, traditionally, we couldn't do without mythology. We couldn't do without our myths. Another example which I can give, maybe I should talk about Mozambique. I find Mozambique very, very, very interesting. It's a country which went through so many wars. Many people died. Almost every single citizen was a fighter who could get a gun or some kind of weapon. Eventually, they went through a long process of resolving the conflict, of coming together. So, okay, the conflict was ended. But then, a few months after that, they started seeing many naked people on the street. Naked, stark naked, walking and throwing stones and all that. What is going on? What's happening? Why? And then they discovered, psychologically they are still traumatized because of the war. So some country in Europe offered to send psychologists and psychiatrists and so on. So they sent them. They worked with the Mozambicans and everything was nice. There were no more naked people on the streets, no more stones. Very good. The experts packed their bags, they left. They came back to the Western world. But about 6-7 months after that, they started seeing them appearing again on the street, this time in even bigger numbers. And then someone said, ah, we know what it is. The Western experts came and they ministered to the surface, but what they didn't reach was the African soul and spirit inside. So what did they do? Because it was a big, big, big problem. So what the government did and the people of Mozambique did said, but we have our own package of African traditional ways of dealing with such cases. Let's do that. In fact, I worked with one Mozambican psychologist who had been trained abroad. He's the one who had been connection to bring the others from abroad. He was telling us a story that during the day he is psychoanalyzing and healing people during the day, but at night he escorts them to the traditional, in the night, with traditional healing. And he says, whenever he goes there with his clients, guess whom he finds there? The bishops, the Christian churches, the imams from the Muslim, everybody is there. The big ministers, the who and who, everybody goes there. In fact, someone was saying, and I don't know if this is not a good thing for my brothers and sisters to hear, but there is a fellow African, Dr. Hiskias Asefa, he's from Ethiopia. He said, just scratch the surface of the skin of an African, whether he's a Muslim, she is a Muslim, he's a Christian, she's a Christian, you will find the African underneath. So when we are really pressured by problems, your children are sick, you're losing your job, your animals are dying in numbers, by numbers, what you do, in the night you look for the traditional healer. This happens. Maybe what I should say, and I'm saying this to my brothers and sisters from Africa, is that we are not saying that that is a backward system. It's a system that was working, but when we got influence from outside, we were told that these are things, these are bad things, they are for the devil, and they are for what? So people who do it hiding. And by doing it in hiding, they actually help to make it look bad. But it's not a bad thing. They're not sending you to kill anyone or to poison anyone. So these are some of the examples I would like to share with you. Perhaps I could talk about reconciliation. In Africa, you can't resolve a conflict without reconciling. Reconciling is like putting icing on the cake or tying that nice little ribbon on a present. It's the same, reconciliation. You can go through all these things of settling your disputes with whoever you fought with or who fought with you. You've resolved it, but if you don't put that last lock, which is reconciliation, we think that you will go back to the conflict. So what role does reconciliation play in the African traditional life? Reconciliation is to say we forgive each other. I ask for forgiveness. And they also know that you cannot force anyone to forgive you. You have to be humble to ask for forgiveness. You have no right to demand forgiveness. Dr. Hiskias Asefa says that. You have no right to go to someone whom you did something bad to, and then you say, okay, I'm sorry. And you keep quiet. I said, I'm sorry, did you hear me? Why don't you answer? You have to forgive me, I've said sorry. That is not allowed. To ask for forgiveness, as Dr. Hiskias Asefa says, is the most challenging thing, because when you clash with someone and you defeat that person, you know, you become the victor and you're so big like this and you're seeing that person down there. Now, to say, forgive me, what you're doing actually, you're going down. You're lowering yourself and lifting that person. The person you crushed once, you're bringing that person up to be higher than you. And you're saying, please forgive me. It's really so beautiful. In the African tradition, once you have reconciled, you never, ever mention that conflict again. One of our colleagues here, one of the students, is in Bern today to hear about restorative justice and restitutive justice and all that transitional justice. He will come and brief us tomorrow. I gave him an assignment. I said, okay, You take away from me, I also give, you have to pay for it. So go listen, take notes, come and give a few minutes to the students tomorrow. So students, get ready. He's going to give you some feedback there. How do we do reconciliation? I'll again give the tribe of Kony in northern Uganda. It's really so beautiful, and that's why I'm mentioning restorative and restitutive justice. When eventually the fighting forces have managed to resolve the conflict and it's gone, the party that is to blame, which has already said, I'm so sorry I did it, it's my fault, because that party has been prepared to say that, then they've got to bring something like either a cow or a goat or something. It's got to be some form of food. It's not money. Traditionally, it was never money. It was food, something you eat or something you drink. Why? Because you're not paying off that person, because you could never pay back that person. Whatever you bring is put in the middle, is blessed, and all the two parties or all the parties share in eating and drinking that. Now they actually take it even further. They have something they call matoput. It's a plant, very bitter, very, very bitter. I've seen it. Very bitter. To put it on your tongue, you feel like, you know, scraping off your tongue, the surface of your tongue. They get that plant, they squeeze it and put some, I think, little water or something. They get the sap out of it, the juice. And the parties that are reconciling drink from the same container, from the same vessel. So you pass it from one person to the other to the other. Very bitter. Like we saw in the clip, in the peacekeeping clip, you're not allowed to spit it out. You have to swallow it. There is a significance of that. Because they could have got an orange and squeezed it, or mangoes or something, but they got that bitter thing. It shows that really to accept, to forgive someone is very difficult. And to be able to say, I'm sorry is difficult. To say, I forgive you is very difficult. To resolve to forget the past is gone. Let's focus on the future. Let's build a strong and better relationship is also very difficult, but we've got to do it. So they drink that. If it is from a different tribe, the warriors or the fighters bend their spears. So you get your spear and bend it, the metal part. I don't know if you've seen spears. Please visit a museum if you've never seen it. It's something very strong. Now to bend that metal takes a lot of strength, if I may call it that. And once you've bent a spear, it means this spear will never kill again, will never cause harm again. And the two clashing groups, or the groups that have clashed, have to do that. It's really wonderful. It's really, really, really wonderful. The challenge there now is, if, like the Lord's Resistance Army comes back, they didn't cause harm only in northern Uganda among their own people, they caused harm in South Sudan, they are causing harm in Eastern Congo, they are causing harm in Central African Republic. There are even rumors they've gone as far as Darfur. And they are on foot. So now, how will they drink the same shrubs with each other? I mean, I don't think I would like to drink those shrubs and herbs and things. Spears, we don't have spears anymore. What are we going to do? Break the guns? Once I was caught up in Liberia when we were disarming the rebels with the UN, and for just 2 days they took over again. But I was watching everything happening and the guns were going up, poo, 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 in the air. And I thought they were celebrating, because I'm here to celebrate. For countries with the culture of the gun, they shoot in the air. And I was, yeah, we've done it, yeah. I didn't know what they were doing. They was actually taking over the country. And I saw it all just in front of me. So how do we, with all those, the things I've described are very traditional, very like in the old age, during my grandmother's time, maybe a little bit during my parents' time. How do we do that today? That is our challenge. Plus, I said also, my kids don't know anything about this. I wouldn't ask them to tell even one single proverb from my tribe. And because I belong to one tribe, my husband belongs to another tribe, we're living in another part of the country, my children, when they try to speak the local language, One word is from this language, another one, and for them they feel, yeah, we've spoken, but actually they haven't. Or one word, they mix it, half this way, half that way. It's really strange. These are some of the challenges we have. Plus, we have the court system which is going on. In fact, this is a big challenge. Not everyone can access the court system. Not anyone can access the justice system. We have that big problem. So people are left with doing what? Trying to go to the traditional. The traditional, they don't remember it that well. So where are they? What is happening? What is going on? For me, my topic is to say the challenges of the beautiful African traditional mechanisms. How can we apply them today under the circumstances that I've said, including the war economies. Today, the class was analyzing 10 different, okay, the room has been good, but you can see some beautiful things along the wall. Very creative. They did some great stuff this morning. Yeah, how can you use the African traditional mechanisms in those kinds of wars? We used to have the elders. The elders were very instrumental in coming up with solutions. But now with the gun, we have the scourge of the gun, the AK-47. I think you've heard of it. It's a rifle with this, holding the bullets, that one. Yeah, the youth, who are usually the ones who are fighting in our situation, how will they listen to the old guys when they have the gun, they have the power? Plus money, the drugs which have come into all these conflicts, the big war economies, so many people are making money off these conflicts. How do we use these traditional mechanisms if we wanted to? If we wanted. Thank you very much for inviting me to give this seminar. Thank you.